weekly route share. So they've got all these weekly reports that are free right now because these guys and gals over at the Fantasy Points Data Suite are just the best. I love any tool that can easily illustrate like trends as the year goes on. And so route rates are, of course, really important. Especially I like route rates for tight ends and running backs. Let's look at running backs here. Okay, so right now we're sorted by who has the highest route rate overall. So that's Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson. But if you're just curious about, what about recently, you can sort that way. You can sort by week 8, week 7, or whatever. And you can look back, like Saquon Barkley, 63% in week 8. That was the third highest among running backs. That was his highest rate since week 1. Maybe that's an encouraging data point. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Hey, I'm Jacob Gibbs from CBS Sports. You might know Beyond the Box Score, the podcast that I do over there. And you probably know me from Twitter at jgibbs_23, where I'm constantly tweeting out fantasy points data, all the good stuff from the data suite. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Mastering the game, the secret stats behind fantasy football. So I'm, of course, very excited to get into this, nerd out, talk about all the good stuff that Scott Barrett and all of the good people over at Fantasy Points Data have hooked us up with. So there are 10 stats that we're going to dig into today that will, I think, help lead you to fantasy success. We're going to cover all of those in this video. Before we do get started, I want to mention that every metric included in this video can be found in the Fantasy Points Data Suite. And we do have a unique code that I can offer you that can be redeemed for all in and data that we can track. And that is promo code STATS10, all caps, STATS10. Okay, STATS10, we've got 10 stats to get into today. Number one, first thing I'm going to talk about, I've got my screen shared here. Let me get it to a good size for you. First thing we're going to talk about is coverage data. So you might know that Ryan Heath and I do a weekly show during the season called Mastering Matchups on Beyond the Box Score. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and do that. I think you'll have a lot of fun with that one. Ryan, of course, writes this great article each week for Fantasy Points Data, where he digs into all the different types of matchups. And that's basically what we're looking to do on the show. Help you with starts and decisions and help you with DFS decisions and sports betting and everything. But I do think that this coverage data, everything that we've got unlocked over here from the data suite is really important beyond just that, just the day-to-day of the season. So it can help you, find tiebreakers for matchups in season. But also I think like knowing how receivers win is relevant. Knowing which receivers are able to, and tight ends are able to beat man coverage, zone coverage, or even specific types of coverage is relevant. Knowing which teams use them and how often each coverage type is used is relevant for sure. And just like having a zoomed out view of like how the league is trying to stop offense and how that's developing. And then which receivers are specialists, which receivers can do all of the things needed, because, they're probably more likely to be able to grow that target share into, big time wide receiver one numbers if they can do it all. For example, like we've seen this season, Brian Thomas Jr. has kind of struggled a little bit to step into the wide receiver one role that was, anticipated there. And I think maybe partially that has to do with some struggles against zone coverage. Maybe we could have foreseen this a little bit, that's something that was part of his profile coming in. And in his rookie season, he was better against man coverage, press coverage, stuff like that. So here, I just noticed that they've got this cool new tool on the data suite, receiving man versus zone. You can find this in the receiving tab here. You see on the top, this one right here, receiving man versus zone. So this right here shows you like the overall per route data. You've got TPRR, target per route run, yards per route run, fantasy points per route run for the players. You can, sorted by position. So I've got receivers and tight ends included here. And then they've got man coverage splits, zone coverage splits, and then they even have it by single high and two high safety looks as well. And you can see and sort the different per route rates for all of these players. So I'm going to set a responsible qualifier here. We'll go with 50 routes. And you'll notice if a player, Adonai Mitchell only has 9 routes against man coverage, so you're going to want to throw that out. But beyond that, you can see like here's Puka Nacua at the very top versus man coverage. Who's somebody who has like Dontavian Wicks. Yeah, great example here. Somebody we've gotten really excited about in the past. Crushes man coverage, very good at getting open. But he's got some struggles here against zone coverage. So that might indicate that he's kind of a limited player in what he can grow into in terms of ceiling, in terms of being able to be a true wide receiver one in an offense. If this were to stick, this lower numbers versus zone coverage over a larger sample size, I do think that would be relevant because at the end of the day, as the coverage matrix will show us, we'll find that here in the team tab at the top, go coverage matrix. At the end of the day, man coverage just isn't used that much. So here you can see man coverage and then fantasy points per dropback allowed again when using man coverage. And they've got zone coverage and fantasy points per dropback allowed when using zone. And then they have all the specific types of coverages over here: cover 0, cover 1. And if this feels like it's over your head a little bit or whatever, you can see a really cool part of the advanced filters here from Fantasy Points Data is that you can see how they chart these. So if you go to coverage scheme and you select man coverage, it gets rid of all of these zone coverages. And so you see that man coverage is cover 0, cover 1, cover 2 man, or bracket coverage. If you click zone, you see that it sets up cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6. And of course, you can learn more about those if you want to. But for the purpose of today, so I just want to focus on the coverage matrix here. So man coverage, 42% is the highest in the league. The Broncos and the Giants, the only teams above 40%. You see the average here is, more around 20, 25%. Teams are using way more zone coverage today. So it's good to know which receivers are able to beat man coverage. I think that's relevant to track year over year, especially early in a receiver's career, to understand what type of player they are. But also, I think that it can be a predictor of, a player who, if you're able to win in one-on-one situations, that is an indicator of skill. Often it has been, like Matt Harmon's research at reception perception has shown that. I've dug into it a little bit as well. And I've tracked this for 5 or 8 years now, looking at different coverage types and how receivers do against it. And you see that a lot of the receivers who've turned into the alpha types, like the best receivers are the ones who they're just uncoverable against man. But they do need to open up that zone beating aspect as well. And there are a few like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, who start out as elite zone beaters, and then their man coverage splits kind of catch up along the way. That's where we're at with Puka now. Is this year he's looking like one of the absolute best man coverage beaters, in addition to having always been one of the best zone coverage beaters. So definitely, if you have time, I encourage you to dig into all of the coverage type stuff. I think it's really, really cool, really fun way to learn more about these players. And another way that you can do it that's cool is so quarterback play affects these splits. These are descriptive stats. They're the results of what has happened. And so, if you've got a quarterback who struggles to read out zone coverages, that could influence your stats in a way that might make it look like you're not good at beating zone coverage when that's not the case. So the team that comes to mind for me is like the Bears with Caleb Williams has had some struggles against cover 3 and just zone coverages in general. So in the data suite here, if you use the search bar, you can search players' names. So you can just look at specifically Rome Odunze here, or if you want to look at the Bears at large, you can just search Bears, and you'll see target per route run rate 35% versus man coverage for Odunze. Easily the highest, easily clears everybody here. I mean, DJ Moore's only here at 19%. 3 yards per out run for Odunze compared to 1.3 for DJ Moore. Like Odunze has absolutely been an alpha wide receiver one this season, but it hasn't always been there in terms of the elite target rates. And I think part of the reason for that fluctuation is, this right here, 22% target per route run rate versus zone. But if you compare it to the rest of the team, he's still, the only player who has a higher rate versus zone in terms of yards per route run is Luther Burden, and he's only run 48 routes. So, this, might indicate that while Odunze is probably better versus man, that's something that's been part of his profile pretty much all along the way. I also don't know if like this rate necessarily is indicative of a limiting factor to his profile going forward. And I think comparing it to his teammates can be a relevant way to like contextualize that. So there's lots of cool stuff you can do with coverage splits. So those were the first two stats. I wanted to show you the coverage splits, get you thinking about the different ways that you can use that data, because I do think it's kind of the backbone for understanding the wide receivers and tight ends. There's definitely nuance that comes in, and that's why we watch the game, we love the game. But this is probably directionally accurate most of the time, is going to get you thinking about things in the right way. And it is, I think, like the backbone is like knowing the ways the defenses are playing. And again, check out the coverage matrix is so cool. And then knowing how receivers are able or unable to beat what defenses are trying to do. So first stat, coverage splits. Got to know this man zone tool, really cool. All this stuff that you saw me looking at here is in the advanced receiving tab. And you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. You can look at like all these stats that I'm showing you here for the receivers. You can look at like the defensive side of the ball as well. Super cool stuff in the advanced receiving tab. If we took all the time that I would like to just like talk you through every single thing here today, it would be a 3-hour podcast, but we're not going to do that. Go dig on your own. That's the beauty of the Fantasy Points Data Suite here. We've got a gold mine. Okay, the number 2 stat here was matchups in the coverage matrix. I wanted to show you that. While I'm here, I want to show you some, as part of our second stat, I want to show you some quarterback stats. So you can look at, I'm going to get into quarterback stats in more detail, but I wanted to show you that you can look at quarterback splits versus different coverage types as well. So one way to do that is through this advanced passing tool here. And then you can, over here, the filters you need to spend time with the filters too. There's so many cool ways to get, exactly what you want using these advanced filters. So I'm going to Control F coverage and go to coverage scheme here. And, I was talking about Caleb Williams versus cover 3. So let's look at cover 3 splits. Cover 3 is the coverage type that is used the most in the NFL. If we go back to the coverage matrix and sort by cover 3, you see the Atlanta Falcons at 51%. Look at all these different types of coverages they've got charted here. 51%, over half of their, defensive plays are just this one coverage type. And cover 3 can be broken down in a number of different ways, but as a blanket statement, that's like easily the most common coverage type. So we've got quarterback versus cover 3 splits here. And, you can do like the basic stats like completion percentage, yards per attempt, passer rating, and all that stuff. I'm going to set a minimum drop back qualifier here. Let's go with 50. And you can also do stuff like, let's see what the average depth of target is. Who's more likely to attack down the field, and then maybe not so much. Like Michael Penix, only a 5.7 yard average depth of target versus cover 3. Josh Allen, 6.5. Some quarterbacks are more likely to take, the conservative approach to check down. Like Drake May has had very specific splits versus different coverage types this year, more 2 high safeties and stuff. He's been a lot more likely to just take the check down. He's followed, Josh McDaniels' offensive design to a T, and we're seeing an MVP type of season so far. You can look at deep throw rate versus this coverage type. You can look at how often they're finding their first read, which is interesting. A lot of that is due to the quarterback, but some of that's due to the play designer too, being able to design competently coverage beaters against all these different coverage types. So again, we're looking at just against cover three, how often these quarterbacks are getting to their first read. And then you can look at, how accurate they were, how often they were delivering a catchable ball against these coverage types. So if you want to get, more and more specific, here you'll find Caleb Williams at the very bottom here, 66% catchable ball rate versus cover three. Justin Fields 68%. Nobody else is even below 70%. So like that's a problem, right? If you're way below the rest of the league against the most common coverage type, that is a problem for the functionality of the offense. 23% off target rate for Caleb Williams versus cover three. All right, this has just turned into me bashing Caleb Williams. That's not what this video was meant to be. Okay, so these quarterback splits are very cool, and being able to look at all this in with the matchups in mind, I think is really cool thing to do throughout the year. But also, like I said, like understanding stuff like this might, like if you knew this about Caleb going into the year, then you knew that it's a pretty risky bet to bet on these Bears guys, even though we're excited about Ben Johnson and all the different factors here in Chicago. Like if this issue persists, that can just be something that limits the offense from getting, converting on first downs and stuff like that. That can be a hindrance. Okay, number three, we'll move a little faster through these ones. Weekly route share. So they've got all these weekly reports that are free right now because these guys and gals over at the Fantasy Points Data Suite are just the best. I love any tool that can easily illustrate like trends as the year goes on. And so this is, of course, useful as we're in the season, but also as you look back at a season, to see how a player's role developed as the year went on. And so route rates are, of course, really important. Especially I like route rates for tight ends and running backs. Let's look at running backs here because I'm going to spend most of my time here with the pass game pieces, I think. Okay, so right now we're sorted by who has the highest route rate overall. You can see that on the far right of your screen here. If I'm doing a good job, yeah, I think that you can see that. So that's Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson. But if you're just curious about, what about recently, you can sort that way. You can sort by week 8, week 7, or whatever. And you can look back, like Saquon Barkley, 63%. In week 8, that was the third highest among running backs. That was his highest rate since week 1. Maybe that's an encouraging data point, maybe that's something to know, so this is just really cool to me that this is available, especially that it's available for free. And again, it's in the weekly reports. There's lots of cool stuff over here. Like this pass rate over expectation is something that I reference a lot during the season for sure. Go check out these weekly reports. Absolutely no excuse not to be doing that. If it's free, right at your fingertips, you gotta be doing that. Okay, so stat number 3 is the route share report. I do think that's really important for running backs, for tight ends, for receivers, of course, too. Stat number 4, I want to spend a little bit more time with the advanced receiving tab. This has got to be my favorite tab on the data suite. If I had to guess, this is the one I spend the most time on. So I'm going to show you some of the stuff that I like in here, some of the stuff that you can only find in the data suite, talk you through some advanced filters while we're here. So I want to look at first read targets, of course. Those are, what hook a lot of people, I think, when it comes to Fantasy Points data. Pretty unique stat and an important one. It's proven to be relevant for fantasy and predictive for fantasy. But I'm going to first let you look at this stat. I think this stat is really cool. They have, you probably know about like yards after contact and missed tackles force for running backs, right? I think that's really common. We see those stats a lot. They have it for receivers, and I don't see that as often. So over here, you see missed tackles forced. You can see like Khalil Shakir, just an absolute dog. 0.42 missed tackles forced per reception is absolutely nuts. Leads the league in missed tackles forced, even though he has like half as many receptions as Jamar Chase, who has the next highest number. And then here you can see yards after contact, which is very cool. It's not the same as yards after the catch. And so like here we see Harold Fannin, Tucker Kraft obviously is the guy you think of at the tight end position, but Fannin is up here as well. And I just think these stats are really cool to see like George Pickens. I don't think people often think of him as this type of receiver. He's thought as more of like a perimeter winner. But this has been a big part of his game pretty much all along the way. If he can, and especially now that he has a quarterback who's unlocked the catch and run aspect by being able to throw to him with timing and anticipation and accuracy, you see him up here at the very top of the league. So this is just another cool flavor stat that I wanted to point out to kind of like get you thinking about these players, the types of players that they are. That's where Ryan Heath and everybody, all the guys doing great work over the data suite are trying to find predictive data, you know? So Garrett Wilson, you'll see at the very top of the first read target rate here. And that's just a good note to bring up that this rate only tracks the games that they've played in, which is great. I love that. I know a lot of data sources, the rate will just carry over even with missed games, and so it'll get skewed. But this is cool. So first read targets are really important for sure. And again, you can do this. You can look at team by team. So we'll go to just the Seahawks, and it's like so clear. It's like all Jackson Smith and Jigba dominating the first read target distribution. You can, of course, do it by position if you want to look and see like who's getting first read targets at tight end. They're kind of rare. You can do that. And so it's Trey McBride at the very top, 35%. The next highest is 24%. So all the different ways to illustrate this stat. Another thing I wanted to show you in the advanced filters is the columns tab here. I think that this is really cool. So we've got, I love that they give you so much here. Look at all this, it's like you get to choose, you get to pick your poison here, and so it's great to just have it all here for you. But sometimes it can be a bit distracting for me where it's like, where's that stat? Where's the first read target rates again? So if you ever want to just get, exactly what you're looking for, you can come over here to this columns tool here and do that. So I'm just going to go like, I want target share. I want the percentage of the team's receiving yards. I want, let's go with end zone targets, first read target rate, and let's go with first down per route run rate and catchable target rate. We're going to talk about some of these stats in a moment. And so you can do that. And then it's just a much, look at this, simple, And so if you want to reference first read targets, it's right there. And you don't have all that other stuff. And then if you want to add anything in, be like, okay, I actually want all the per route data in addition to, the target share. I want targets per route run. So you add, there's yards per route run, there's targets per route run. And if you're like, well, I want first down per route run rate to be, in the same vicinity, you can move all these around. Very cool. Very customizable. So there we've got all the per route data right next to each other. And then, this is the only place to do this really, to have all this right at your fingertips, to be able to move it around. And then of course, to be able to filter it all out. So if you want to look at different coverage types, you can do that. So if you want to look at specifically, if you're really looking, you're really deep in the weeds, you want to look at just, this team uses a ton of cover two. So I want to look at cover two splits only, not just zone. Or if you want to look at, a little bit more general, but if you want to look at single high or two high safety splits, you can do that right here. There's so much that you can do over here in the filters tab. What are a few other cool filters I could show you? Like catchable targets. So they track it. I've got like catchable target rate right here is this CTGT percentage. Let me get rid of my filters here. But you also, if you want to look at like just how a receiver performed on catchable targets, right here, you can do that. So I'll bring up catchable target rates, looking only at catchable targets, and we can see, like, here's expected fantasy points per game, only catchable. And then you can also look at non-catchable to get an idea of, like, so I'm going to go with some different columns here. I'm going to go with volume numbers. I can see, like, how many targets, how many air yards, how many, let's go with end zone targets did a receiver receive that were uncatchable. So Davante Adams, you see that we've got catchable, no. Davante Adams, 23 uncatchable targets. The next highest is 17. 6 uncatchable end zone targets for Davante Adams. 9 uncatchable end zone targets for George Pickens. He's just had a massive number of end zone targets in general. 284 air yards uncatchable for Pickens. 337 air yards uncatchable for Troy Franklin. So this is definitely important to know this. If your model that's predicting like future fantasy points is just taking into account like total air yards, it's good to know that a lot of Troy Franklin's air yards haven't actually even been catchable. And so you can see like the final XFP number over here, they have that for you as well. 58 uncatchable expected fantasy points for Davante Adams. I also think it's really cool to look at catchable air yards for the passing game, and then also for like the receivers. So Jackson Smith and Jigba, 706 catchable air yards in only 7 games. The next highest number is 547 in 8 games. That's so crazy, dude. Like, this is just, it's really cool to have all this available. Eight catchable end zone targets for Davante Adams. You see 5 here for Pickens. So 5 out of, I think it was 14, maybe 13 have been catchable. So it's the catchable, uncatchable stuff is good to know. Like, maybe it means that like the quarterback play is just going to be bad for this player all year, and so you should not overreact to their expected fantasy point numbers and their volume numbers and stuff. But that's not really the case in Pickens' case here, right? So maybe, or Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford, maybe this just suggests that this is the first year for these guys with a good quarterback, and there's a lot of meat left on the bone. What if these uncatchable targets start turning into catchable targets that could be really even bigger numbers than we're already seeing? So yeah, all the catchable stuff is really cool. So let's look at per route data. Per route data has been like the backbone of my receiver research for a while now. And I love having fantasy points data available to filter it out and use it in different ways. So you can look at per route rates, within all these different filters, like when a quarterback is blitzed, when a quarterback is under pressure, when a team is facing different coverage types, and use per route data to better understand what to expect. So I've got yards, targets, first downs per route run, and expected fantasy points per route run, which is really cool. Only available at the Fantasy Points data suite. And I'm going to set a minimum qualifier of 50 routes. And another shout out to the Fantasy Points data suite for this. Their per route data I trust more than anywhere else, because they track it and they clean up a lot of the like junk plays. Like if a player is blocking on a screen or something like that, there's a lot of those plays that get tracked as routes when they aren't really. And so I anytime I can, I go to their per route data. I did want to point that out. So let me get you zoomed in a little bit here. So we can just play around with the filters here, and look at the different ways that this stuff is usable. And then also just it's good to know who the best per route producers are. Like first downs per route run, Ryan Heath has done a bunch of research on that to help you understand like why that is important for future fantasy scoring. So I'm just going to look at the receiver position, and Let's do some first down per route run rate digging. Okay, so Jackson Smith and Jigba, number 1 by a lot. This guy's insane. Puka Nacua right up there with him. You see over here on the left the total number of routes that these players have run. And then it's Amon St. Brown, of course, but then like Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, those guys, those probably stand out as surprises. Of course, that offense has just been a machine. But Keenan Allen, like I think it's important to know that some of these players, like this, to me, stands out as I've felt more confident all year betting on Keenan Allen than Quentin Johnson, and this is a big reason why, is QJ has been so dependent on these huge plays. And then if you look at the first down per route run rate, it does a good job illustrating that. Keenan Allen's rate is almost 3 times higher than Quentin Johnson's rate. Johnson's rate is the same as Trey Harris, rookie Trey Harris, on a per route basis. So lots of cool stuff that you can dig into and find here if you're curious about per route data, which I talk about a lot. They've got it all over here at the data suite. Okay, we've talked about coverage types, coverage splits. We've talked about all the different things that you can do with the advanced receiving tool, the route share report, matchups, catchable targets, and all of that. I think this is all really good stuff. And so I want to get back to quarterbacks a little bit. I teased it earlier. I showed you some of those accuracy charting numbers that they have. So I think that's really cool. So you'll see here like Drake May, QB1 in highly accurate throw rate. Also QB1 in catchable ball rate, above 80%. Only him and Dak Prescott have a rate above 80%. That's pretty freaking good for a rookie, right? Where do I find that? It's all here in the advanced passing. Where do I find that on Drake May? You can find all of this in the advanced passing tab over here. So I set a minimum dropbacks number here, and we're going to look and see who have been the most accurate quarterbacks through 2 months. Shout out to Rod Taylor. I need to set a larger qualifier. All right, Drake May, absolutely cooking. And so you see that here. Daniel Jones has been as well. There's lots of cool and important notes to make here. So like first off, this first retarget rate for Daniel Jones is way higher than any other quarterback. I don't mean to minimize what he's done. Like he's still delivering these throws, but it is relevant to know that like he has a 77% first retarget rate, and then you've got some quarterbacks down here in the 50 to 60% range. Again, this is a stat that's conflating both quarterback and coordinator, like the offensive design, but also the quarterback's choice within that design. But it does affect things. Another stat that affects things when it comes to this accuracy charting is average depth of target. So we've got Drake May at the top here, and Daniel Jones not far behind him. Let's look at these guys' average depth of target. 8.3 yards for May, 8.7 yards for Daniel Jones. Respectable, right? That's not super low, but it's definitely like lower than Lamar Jackson, who's next at 9.5 yard average depth of target, or Sam Darnold has a 10-yard average depth of target. To me, it's almost more impressive, or as impressive at least, that Sam Darnold's up in the vicinity of these guys in these accuracy notes with such a high average depth of target. And so this is, again, where filters come in and are really interesting and important. So I showed you earlier that you can look at coverage types when it comes to this, at these accuracy notes. Another thing you can do is look at the depth of target. You can set it at, let's go with a minimum of 10 yards. So any throw that's coming 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Okay, so my qualifier is still set at 100. So now it's using that with the filter. So we're going to lower that. And now we have quarterbacks who have 25 throws of 10 or more air yards. There are 35 of them. You'll see at the bottom. Shout out Bo Nix. Shout out Geno Smith. Not good. 50% catchable ball rate on throws of 10 or more air yards. At the top, Drake May, 80%. Sam Darnold, 74%. Most accurate quarterback on these throws, Sam Darnold, tied with Lamar Jackson, 58% on throws of 10 or more air yards. If you want to get even more specific, you could look at like when a quarterback was or wasn't pressured. You can look at play action, because that definitely boosts efficiency. There's a lot of different ways to make this more specific. I just can't encourage you enough to have fun with these filters. You can look at, first reads. Like, so here it says targeted read. You can look at first, you can look at secondary if you want to like remove checkdowns, which probably aren't coming into effect much here with the depth of target filter in effect. Um, but if you're looking at just the general accuracy numbers and you want to just like remove checkdowns, you can do that. You can remove design throws if you just want to look at a specific type of throw. I think it's interesting to see which quarterbacks are doing the best at getting like when they get past their first read, when they're not like just in the hectic scramble drill or whatever, when they're not taking a check down, but they're actually like reading out the defense from the pocket and delivering a calm pass, like making the decision that's dictated based off what the defense is doing. Who's able to do that and find people effectively and accurately? There's a lot of cool ways to use this, of course. How many times am I going to say that today? I love it. I love the data suite. All right, that's stat number 7. I love these accuracy notes. I think these are so cool. Stat number 8. Finally, we're going to talk about running backs, the most important position in fantasy, and maybe the least talked about. It feels like. Okay, so there's three things I want to focus on here. We've got the bell cow report, which is the most important probably for in-season data tracking, but all of these are cool. So we're going to start with the bell cow report. I say it's probably the best because it basically kind of cuts the fat. It's got like the stuff that you need to know week to week. And again, you can, if you want to look at it week over week, illustrated that way, then you can do that here in like the weekly route share report, target share report, snap share report. You can look at any of those and then get it where it's just running backs. But also, if you want to see it all here, this is the season long data. And so you've got expected fantasy points over here, and all the different ways to break that down in terms of like looking at the team's expected fantasy points. Here's the actual production, and you can compare those to, here's the route rate. So this is just the stuff that is important for fantasy scoring at the running back position. And then if you want to like look at, let's go just the past month or whatever, or just past 2 weeks. Maybe you're curious about, a running back who stepped in for a starter. They've only been in for 2 weeks. And so you want to look at just those 2 weeks, what their expected fantasy point numbers are. You can do that. And then another thing, so this is something that you can do for advanced receiving or quarterback play or whatever. So if you go in the advanced filters to split and you go to game and select week, this will bring up, so right now I've got just weeks 5 through 8. So it'll bring up every game within that range. But if you have the whole year, it'll bring up every game for the whole year. And then if you go, so right now what we're looking at is league wide. You see that the highest route rate of a running back for any week 5 through 8 game is 83% Bijan Robinson, 82% Christian McCaffrey. And so that's a cool way to look at it. You see like Christian McCaffrey is occupying 4 of the top 9 spots. But if you just want to look at one specific player, you can do that. So let's go Kyron Williams and look at his like expected fantasy points week over week. It's kind of bounced around a little bit. Like whereas like maybe somebody like Bijan, if I had, that's not a good example. I was like the last game was bad, so that's not a good example. But some of these running backs you'll notice will have like a tighter range. Like Christian McCaffrey is like pretty much always up in that 20 range. I think this is a really cool thing to do when looking at like first read targets and stuff like that. Or if you want to look at like the accuracy notes that I was talking about earlier, to just see like consistency, but also spike weeks. Like I think it's relevant if a receiver is able to give you weeks where they over a whole game demand a 50% first read target rate, stuff like that. That's not that common. And maybe, doing that is a signal that they can do that more. Maybe they could do that over a large sample, over a whole season eventually, maybe. So like a Emeka Egbuka, I've got it, here's all, it's like, let me bring the weeks over here. Emeka Egbuka, 53% first read target rate in week 8. So you can sort it by this stat, or if you want to sort it, week by week, that'll offer a representation of like how it's moved. And so at the beginning of the year, it's 20%, 20%, then you go 35, 29, 27, 25, 31, and then all the way up to 53%. So we're seeing higher rates lately, and then the spike weekend. So that's got me pretty interested. Um, okay, definitely had to show you that weekly split here before I got out of here. All right, so the bell cow report is really cool. I talked you through that. Expected fantasy points are really cool. Let's talk about this basic rushing. I don't feel like this one maybe gets as much love as the other one. Of course, advanced stats are fun, and the bell cow report is what's most important during the season. And you know, maybe this is just me bringing up a way for me to sneak Bashal Tootin into this video. That's exactly what it is. But you can do this. You can like sort by the percentage of runs that gain positive yards, the percentage of runs that gain 3 or more yards. You see Bashal Tootin at 75%. And this is just an interesting way to like look at the running backs and how they're delivering their production. So like you'll notice that Tootin's numbers drop off. There's nothing. There's no runs of 10 or more yards, which is pretty crazy, right? For a guy who's first in the league in terms of creating gains of 3 or more yards and has all the speed and is averaging over 4 yards per carry. That's with no explosive runs at all. No explosive element to his game. Very strange. And then if you sort by like 15% or 15 or more yards. Brees Hall, J.K. Dobbins, over 10% of their carries have gained 15 or more yards. But then like if you look at the number that have gained positive yards, it's really not super high for those guys. It's just I think this is really fun. It's not super important, I don't think necessarily for fantasy. So I selected Dobbins and Brees Hall. That's another cool capability you have here. Um, that's something cool that you can do at any time. Like I sometimes will select. I'm bouncing all over the place now. This is going to be more than 10 stats. I hope that's okay. Um, I will sometimes select a stat, and if I want to look at 2 stats, so what I'm going to show you is like I'll look at pressure rate. So I went to advanced passing defense, and I'm going to control F and find pressure. So I'm going to sort by pressure rate, and this is showing me the defenses that have generated the highest pressure rate this year. And then you can select top 10. You see how I did that right here? And that will stay as I now sort by time to pressure. And so the Minnesota Vikings get pressure at the fastest rate of any defense. They blitz all the time. Brian Flores is crazy, right? Um, this is cool because now I can have the visualization of these blue teams were the best pressure teams. They were getting pressure at the highest rate. And I just think that's relevant because like the Vikings getting this crazy fast time to pressure and then the Steelers getting this crazy fast time to pressure isn't quite as meaningful when the pressure rate is so much lower for the Steelers. And I just wanted to show you this top 10 thing that you can do. It's pretty cool. If you ever want to compare stats side by side or whatever. All right, back to running backs. Let's finish up here. So I showed you this. I think the basic rushing stat is pretty cool. You can look at the percentage of runs that have been chunk plays or positive plays or whatever. You can also look at like the percentage of the teams inside the 10 carries, and there's some cool stuff you can do here. But I think most people are interested in this, the advanced rushing, missed tackles, force, all that good stuff. So advanced rushing is where we're going to end with our 10th or maybe 13th. I don't really know. Our 10th stat today. Advanced rushing. So I have a minimum of 25 attempts. And again, this is a cool one to use filterization here. So you could do like yards before contact, so like any play where you were met at or behind the line of scrimmage, the running back was met at or behind the line of scrimmage. Here's their stuffed rate. Okay, I need to move the qualifier down. Let's go with 10. So first, I'm going to sort by attempts to show you who has been hit at or behind the line of scrimmage the most. And so you got Saquon Barkley, 38. Again, here's the filter that I used. 38 of these runs for Saquon Barkley this year, compared to 32 for Christian McCaffrey, 31 for Ashton Jeanty, 27 already for Judkins, who hasn't played as many games as these guys. Not ideal. You don't want your running back getting crushed behind the line of scrimmage. And you can see this is why they have negative rushing yards on these plays. So if you sort by stuffed rate and then flip it around to the lowest, this is pretty cool, right? This is interesting. It's a small sample size. You don't want to overreact to it, but you could look at last year's data if you want a larger sample size. James Cook, by far the lowest stuff rate. Javonte Williams is in that range too. Isaiah Pacheco, interesting, but again, pretty small sample size, only 11 attempts for Isaiah Pacheco within this sample. There's just different ways you can do this. You can look at they had at least 2 yards before contact block. How did they do? Why are you getting stuffed on these runs? That seems crazy. So here's the success rate on these runs, and then you can look at any of these advanced stats you can now look at with that filter. So that's something to think about, is the different ways that you can filter. And then, you can look at the different types of personnel. So what the offense was running. This definitely affects efficiency for these running backs because it dictates the way the defenses play them. There's just so many cool filters. You heard me say, wow, there's lots that I didn't even know that they had that, you could spend a lifetime in the data suite here. All right. Let me show you some of the most popular stats here. So missed tackles forced. I'm going to move this qualifier back up. Let's go 50. Missed tackles forced. I like the fantasy points data suite's missed tackles forced charting. No running back stats are really hard to chart and to quantify. But I do think they do a good job. So Cam Scadaboo stands out to me. I have a stat called tackles avoided that I get through PFF and True Media, and Cam Scadaboo doesn't look good within that metric, and that doesn't sit right with me. But it's because he's getting swarmed a lot, he's not making people miss so much. That is in his wheelhouse. He just, the way that the offense has kind of devolved, that hasn't been available to him as much, those types of opportunities. This is a slightly different version of that stat, and I think it does a better job of capturing what guys who are just finishing through contact or breaking tackle. I think it does a better job of giving a more, I guess, maybe a more holistic view or something of what running backs are doing to create on their own. And then of course you also have yards after contact. And I do prefer that they're charting too, just in the time that I've compared my eyes. I do watch a bunch of the film on these guys, and so I'll look at the plays that are charted as missed tackles forced or yards after contact from the other data providers, and I feel like this lines up better with what I'm seeing. And so you've got yards after contact per attempt. Rico Dowdle just been absolutely crushing this year. You've got missed tackles forced over here, yards before contact per attempt, and again, this doesn't have to be predictive, doesn't have to imply anything about a running back's skill necessarily. So I don't want you to see Jahmyr Gibbs at the top of this list and see that he doesn't have that many yards after contact and think, oh, is he overrated or something? This can just be descriptive, right? Jahmyr Gibbs is really unique, and what he does so well is he avoids contact at all, because he's just outrunning them to the spot. He gets the spots faster than anyone really can. And so that's what you see here. Same thing, James Cook, obviously these guys being the top, I think hopefully will prove the point that this stat is definitely important, and yards after contact isn't the end all be all here. And then the last thing that is really cool here, if you do like the schematic matchup type of notes that I gave you for the passing game, you've got that for the running game too. This is something that Ryan and I dig into on mastering matchups on Beyond the Box Score, is there's different types of runs. Some offenses really specialize in zone running. Some offenses really specialize in man and gap running. So you'll see, 78% of Jaylen Warren's runs have been zone runs. That's really high. 70% of Bucky Irving and Rashad White's runs have been man gap runs. And so you can look at this and see how the running backs have fared on these specific types of runs, how often those types of runs have been called for them. And then if you want, you can look at, you can flip it over to the defensive side of things. So I'm going advanced rushing, going team defense here, and you can see how it lines up here, success rate allowed on zone runs, yards per carry allowed on zone runs. And, you can compare, they're actually much worse against zone runs than man runs, if you want to do this and play the matchup game week to week. It's all at your fingertips here at the Data Suite. So many cool things, and I feel like we just scratched the surface today. But yeah, that's a lot. I have a ton of fun over here. I hope that this gets you curious and thinking about different ways that you can use the Data Suite. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me at jgibbs_23. I would be happy to talk data with you. It's one of my favorite things to do. All right, I'm going to get out of here. I'm just gonna again mention that every metric we talked about today can be found in the Fantasy Points Data Suite, and that if you do want to go check it out for yourself, we've got a code for you that can be redeemed for all-in access. All this data that we track, that code is stats10, all caps, stats10. Go check it out for yourself at the Fantasy Points Data Suite.